Hi all, AD here from Jaunts and Jaunts. As always, thank you so much for clicking on the video. I'm in deepest, darkest Sussex. I'm in a village called Westham, and I found this church called St Mary's. It's actually just the other side of Pevensey Castle, and we saw that tower, I think it's Norman, in the distance, so we thought we would come and have an explore. Apart from it's called St Mary's because of the sign there, I don't know anything about it, so let's go and have a look around. The village of Westham in East Sussex is just a stone's throw from the famous Pevensey Castle, and at first glance I thought St Mary's Church was just another beautiful old English parish church. It's built from flint with a really sturdy medieval tower, which is what we saw in the distance and decided to come and investigate. But once I began to look a little bit closer, I realised that I was standing in one of the most historically important churches in the whole of England. Because this isn't just an old church, it occupies a remarkable place in the history of the Norman Conquest, and it has witnessed almost 1,000 years of English history unfold around it. Westham itself takes its name from the Saxon words meaning west settlement or west home. Now the village grew immediately outside of the western gate of the Roman fort of Anderida, which later became known as Pevensey Castle. Now long before the Normans arrived, this area was already significant. The massive Roman walls that still stand nearby were built around the year 290 AD as part of the Saxon shore defences, protecting it from Roman Britain and raids across the English Channel. And then came one of the most famous events in English history. I am doing another video from Pevensey Castle, so do check that out on my channel if you're interested. Now in September 1066, the Duke of Normandy, who was called William, landed nearby with an army believed to number around 5,000 men. So after he came ashore, he occupied the Roman fort at Pevensey before marching inland towards Hastings, where just a few weeks later he defeated King Harold and became William the Conqueror. And according to long-standing tradition, St Mary's Church is believed to have been the very first church built by the Normans after their arrival in England. And as always, the historians continue to debate exactly how much of that tradition can be proven, but there is no doubt that parts of the present building date from the late 11th century, making it one of the earliest surviving Norman churches anywhere in the country. And when we walked around the outside, and we'll go back outside there again in a moment, you can still see many Norman features. During the late 14th century, a substantial north aisle and the impressive west tower were added, and that gave the church much of its present-day appearance. But in the early 15th century, the chancel here was rebuilt, or it might even just have been heavily remodelled, and that really reflected the confidence and the wealth of medieval England before the massive upheavals of the Reformation. And one of the things that immediately stands out is the size of this church. For what is now a very small village, St Mary's feels unusually large, and there's a good reason for that. And that's very nice, isn't it? Celebrating its 900th anniversary. Now, isn't this extraordinary? A fragment of Solomon's temple, chipped off a foundation stone by Howard Hopley and embedded in marble and placed here on the wall. I can honestly say I definitely wasn't expecting to find that here today. It's one of the many things I love about exploring these churches. You just never know what you're going to find. They're just like these ordinary, unassuming old buildings, and then you find such an extraordinary amount of history and stories about the people nearby. Anyway, I'll get back to telling you a little bit more about the church itself. So it would have had a really close relationship with the nearby Pevensey Castle, and it would have served not only the local village but also people that lived and worked in the castle itself. And some historians also believe that the church may once have been associated with the medieval hospital of St. Cross that was nearby, and that medieval hospital would have looked after the poor and travellers. And there's also documentary evidence recording the hospital during the 13th century, and there are suggestions that part of the church may once have connected with the buildings belonging to it. There's a beautiful medieval timber roof, as I'm sure you've already noticed, and when it was built it was done using crown posts and queen posts, and there were techniques that have helped support the roof of churches for centuries. And there's this beautiful old 15th century font. And towards the east end of the church as well, apparently there's fragments of a 15th century stained glass windows and tracery, but I didn't actually find that, I'm afraid, so apologies. But we did find some lovely kneelers when my husband found these. They're always extraordinary. You could spend hours. I could do a whole series actually just on these beautiful embroidered kneelers. Maybe I will do that. There is actually a church in Surrey that has a catalogue and photographs for reference of who's actually made them and who sold them and what their significance are. So maybe I'll do another video from there in the future. And there was a lovely war memorial. There was actually two. So this one is from the First World War, and then there was another one from the Second World War, which I thought was really interesting because there's actually at least two women's names on there, and I'm not sure if I've ever noticed that before in a parish church. So we got Myrtle Wilkinson down there. Can you see her? She's right down the bottom there. And Peggy Harland, who, interesting enough, is also with a Robert Harland. So I'm not sure if that was a family member. I'm assuming so. And there was this beautiful iron cross that must have come off something, and I found some, they may have been the original oil lamps from the church. They're just sitting over here on the window ledge, and we have this beautiful stained glass window. It was lovely to be able to get so close to them because quite often you're just looking at them from afar, but the workmanship in there is absolutely beautiful. I didn't realise they had quite so much details on them. Like, you can even see the buttons on his uniform there. Beautiful. Unlike castles that eventually become ruins, not all of them, but quite a few of them, churches like this at St Mary's have remained the living buildings, adapting to changing times while still preserving the echoes of every century that has passed. And we're just going to pop out quickly into the churchyard, and that really offers its own opportunity to pause and reflect. And because, like many ancient churchyards, it was so worn and weathered, it's almost impossible to read any of the headstones. But I'm sure there's generations of local families here whose lives were intertwined with the history of the local village. So although the headstones are worn and smoothed by centuries of rain and wind, there was a couple that you could still read. Despite St Mary's enormous historical importance, it just feels like a genuine ordinary village church rather than just a tourist attraction, because I think most visitors would automatically go to Pevensey Castle without realising that one of England's oldest Norman churches is just a few minutes walk away. And there was another church right beside Pevensey Castle, but unfortunately it was closed because it was having its bells repaired, so I couldn't video there, but it's a good excuse to come back here on another day, isn't it? And this tree has some supports, so I had this metal one on one side and it had like a wooden support over on the other side. No idea how old that was. Whilst the ruins of the castle represents military conquest, this simple church represents what came afterwards. It reminds us that once battles were over, kingdoms established, ordinary life just continued. Villages grew, families were raised, children were baptised, couples married, funerals held. And we found this war grave, Private Miller from the East Sussex Regiment, just 26, and I absolutely loved. My husband spotted this, done by a child, no doubt. I'm sad you died for us, Alfred Miller. Very touching. Generation after generation have gathered here at this church, making St Mary's not just a monument to history, but part of the continuous story of English community life. The church is also a Grade 1 listed building, and that recognises its exceptional architectural and historic importance. And buildings with this designation make up only a very small percentage of listed buildings across England, placing St Mary's among the country's most significant historic structures. And I spotted this beautiful angel. Isn't it lovely? And given how long ago it was, it's in great condition, so it's obviously very well looked after. I'm going to wrap the video up here from St Mary's. I really do hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, if you could please like, subscribe, hit the hype button all down below, I really would appreciate it. And if you want to help the channel that little bit more, you can use the Buy Me a Coffee link, because I do always support and make donations to every little church that I visit, because it's really, really important, and it's very difficult for them and very expensive for them to maintain the building. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you for the next one. Bye for now. If you do want to visit Westham, you can walk here. It only takes about 5 minutes from Pevensey Castle, and we found this footpath that runs down the side, and it comes out in the car park just outside this tea room. And speaking of this like cafe tea room, we came in here and had some lunch, and it was absolutely wonderful. The staff were lovely. It was just so quaint. And as you can see, it's just set right on the outside of those old castle walls. Beautiful spot, lovely staff, lovely food, and the car park is just beside it. And there's a little bit of history about the Castle Market car park. I just thought I'd let you know if you are visiting.